Meteorology Lab. We are back after a little bit of a break, and I guess some of you may have wondered what might be happening, and we're just, trying to avoid burnout here. And I am also, kind of looking at my business, how much work is needing to go into projects and weighing that kind of against the viewer support. And I hate to say this, but it's actually declined a little bit. I think we've lost a couple of key contributors here to Meteorology Lab, but there are donors and supporters, and a few good ones, and I certainly appreciate it. But the problem is, in the grand scheme of things, there is just not enough hours in the day and a lot of other responsibilities. So I'm still trying to figure that, what we're going to be doing for this summer. And this has been kind of a very frustrating chase spring, or severe weather spring. It's kind of like we went straight from February into June without the typical spring weather. And I know a lot of chasers have had issues this spring. Things have been kind of slim as far as the, photos and chases and tornadoes and things like that. Anyway, so we're kind of seeing where things are looking at for June. So let's head into the current weather and see what's going on. 70s dew points have made their return into Oklahoma and southern Kansas, but we have this front coming out of the high plains. There it is right there, from around the Great Bend area down to about Canadian and Plainview, Texas. And you can see the weaker dew points back behind that front. So this has kind of shut down a lot of the weather in the central and northern plains, and you can see out in Denver 34 dew points. So we're certainly not going to get any upslope flow with this kind of environment. We really need to see those dew points up in the upper 40s to the 50s for severe weather. Further to the south, looking at the Gulf Coast, 70s also making their way northward. We're looking at kind of a late June to early July pattern here, with the sea breeze coming onshore every day or so and making its way about 100 to 200 miles northward. Dew points in the 60s across much of Texas, and see maybe a little bit of a dry line out to the west. Dew points are definitely in the 20s around Monahans, Pecos, Fort Stockton, and we contrast that with 61 at San Angelo and 56 at Sweetwater. So I might be inclined to put the dry line somewhat like that right there. Maybe triple point up there along the Cap Rock northwest of Lubbock, and so that's going to be the dry line right there. And let's look at weather elsewhere around the country. There's the big picture. That's showing the front moving out of the northern plains there, and we've got that very strong high pressure in the northwestern U.S. 1024 millibars in Washington and Oregon, and a very stormy pattern there around Edmonton and western Saskatchewan, bringing in a very strong westerly wind and some showery weather. In the eastern U.S., we've got a stationary front through North Carolina into the central Appalachians. There's been a few showers moving through Ohio down into West Virginia and Big Virginia there. And then as you go further north, you can see we get more under high pressure, kind of a weak high, kind of keeping things kind of cleared out, keeping a dry air mass in place over New England. And then the storms are forming along this frontal zone right here. And a very favorite area for that is just north of the fronts. So they can get going at some place like around Chicago, Indianapolis, Ohio, and then basically track along the front like that. So that's a pattern we often see in the summertime. Elsewhere, let's check out SPC, what they've got going for today. Got an enhanced risk for the Kansas City area up to St. Joseph, and a tornado watch for the Omaha area. And there have been a few tornadoes today. There's the summary, some tornadoes around 7 p.m., mostly in Cass County, Nebraska. Reports of cone-shaped tornadoes, large wedge, and one other tornado looked a little bit rain-wrapped there. And, of course, the hail up to about maybe $0.25 sized. And there's the storms there in the Omaha area. Looks like it's moving south to around Falls City there, about to cross over towards Bethany and St. Joseph. And we can look at the environment there with the 100 millibar mixed layer cape. Pretty high there, up around 3,000 to 4,000. So we'll take a look at the soundings on both the radiosonde and model-derived soundings to see what's going on there. The upper level pattern looking like this, obviously very stormy up in the Pacific Northwest. We got that polar front jet coming on shore into Oregon, into Wyoming, and on up to Saskatchewan. Big upper level low in British Columbia and Alberta. And then that puts the Great Plains still under the influence of the ridge. Looks like the core of it is south of Arizona, but we can see an extension of that ridge on up into Kansas, so that's probably kept a lot of the plains shut down. And we can see that reflected in the 700 millibar temperature field. Pretty impressive, 17 Celsius at Amarillo. So that's going to be close to about 65 Fahrenheit, almost 70 degrees there, up at 10,000 feet. Very warm conditions, and that is all pretty much capping. And the only place where we've seen breaks is up to the north. Nebraska, 700 millibar temperature is about 11 Celsius, and that is certainly in the range this time of year of a breakable cap. So anyway, let's see, we do have the pattern gradually shifting east, and that's bringing height falls into parts of Nebraska and Colorado. So the only problem is, even though the cap is weakening out in the high plains, we've got that dry air coming to the south, so it's almost like when one thing improves, the other starts having problems. And then we can track the moisture flow here this morning. We got close to 60s dew points in the Fort Worth area. Lamont looking at about 59 there. Springfield about 61. And then Lincoln, Nebraska, they're up around 55. So looks like the moisture axis basically runs about like that. It's a very veered wind profile, but certainly some good dew points. All right, let's check out the thickness and isobars. You can see that new frontal system moving there into the northern plains. And let's see, I can see what looks like maybe one boundary like that. Yeah, definitely right there around St. Louis out to Kansas City, and then the tail end of that front all the way down to Amarillo. But it looks like maybe a stronger push coming into Rapid City, Cheyenne, and through Salt Lake City there. So that's probably the next round of cold air coming into the northern plains. And looks like we've kind of lost the 540 decameter thicknesses. So there's been a lot of modification as this comes onto the warm landmass from the Pacific Ocean there. All right, this will probably be a good time to look at satellite, and that's typically when we look at chat. So let's run this. You can see those storms going up there in Nebraska, and you can especially see how devoid the southern and west central plains is of thunderstorm activity. We had that cap out in that area, Amarillo, 17 Celsius. It's kind of rare to see it that high this time of year, but also looks like, I don't know, maybe a little bit of dust perhaps along that front right there. We can see that on some of the closer visible products. It looks like some fires in central Utah, around Durango, Colorado, and west of Cheyenne. Those look like to be some pretty large fires, those trails extending about maybe 150 to 200 miles downstream. All right, let me take a look at chat, see what we got going on tonight. Michelle Curlin working through the books. I appreciate the support, and glad you're appreciating the books there. Yeah, just checking some of the chat here. Sue M. reporting recent rain storms in central Indiana. Carl Berghoff, welcome, and Shirley Keast, 70 degrees in Michigan. Michelle is reporting sunny and warm along the 101 in Ventura. Erica Baker, Coffeyville, Kansas, 88 over 74 with south winds there. Ron Chalfant, 78, and 51 dew point in the Southern California mountains. And hello to Andrew Hotchkiss, Trent Tubazuski, Adam Davis, Bedford, Indiana, watching an MCS develop there. And David Moore, getting some muggy air there. Ryan Toomey's down there in Florida, probably also seeing some muggy air. And I saw some comments about the late start, and that's basically because of the setup time to get all these products set up. I do have some bookmarks to help with that, but it is kind of time consuming getting the charts up, and sometimes we just run over. And if we don't come up, you just have to be patient. But if the countdown clock has been showing that we're going to do a webcast, we'll get on there. Just a matter of time. Justin Pulliam has not been in a severe thunderstorm warning yet in 2018. Yeah, it's definitely been an anomalous year. Alexi Pinkston Walsh is here, and David Lumbert reporting 84 over 68. Megan John, west of Minneapolis, hello. Suim, no, I'm not ill. It's just been really kind of a chaotic week. I was actually having to take a family member to the airport about, we had to leave here about 2 in the morning to get out there, and so I've been sleeping some of the day there and also juggling a lot of business stuff there. Clyde Hoadley, don't understand upper level lows. Well, the upper level low is basically a reflection of cold air down in the low levels. That's what most of these upper lows are, like you see right here in British Columbia. It's just a function of the very high density of cold air, and as a result that brings down the heights and pressures down to lower levels and leaves kind of like more of a void aloft. It's kind of like if you picture cold air being a can of soup. If you warm up that can of soup and give it some pressure, it's going to kind of expand a little bit, and if you stack up those soup cans, they're going to go to a very high height. But if you stack them a little closer together, representing cold air, very dense cans, they have very low volume compared to the mass that's in them, and you stack them up and they don't reach quite as high, and that leaves more of a void aloft, and that's kind of what's happening there. That's really about all that is. And then the jet stream sets up in response to that. So obviously, wherever we have a very cold air mass and a very warm air mass close to each other, the height differential between the two will set up a very strong height gradient between the two, and we'll see the upper level winds picking up there. Undertow 82, welcome to the webcast. 64/61 there, Colonial Heights, Virginia. And yeah, we'll try to pick up that smoke plume on the close-up. Sounds like I have laryngitis. Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I'm feeling almost about 100% here, except for the lack of sleep, but I'll use a little bit of throat spray here. See what that does. All right. I do want to check out that smoke out there in the Rockies on the new GOES-R imagery. I bet that would look pretty interesting. So let's switch over to that. Just got to set that up. Go to a localized sector, and I guess we'll take a look at, let's see. I guess we'll take a look at Durango. And we'll skip about every 4 frames so we can go back a little bit further. Well, earlier today doesn't look like a whole lot going on. This is the Durango area of Colorado. There's the Four Corners. I'm trying to figure out when that smoke starts. Oh, there it is. Looks like that really starts going around late afternoon. Yeah, there it is right there. So I guess it's just kind of a fire there that got out of control. You can see a little bit of pyrocumulus there. And one little hint is if you want to actually find out exactly where these fires are, you can go to NIGHLY, install that program, and look at the imagery, and it will give you a latitude and longitude wherever the mouse is. So you can take those values and put them in Google Earth and find out exactly where the fire is. So running that back, I don't know what mountain that is, but apparently it's been stewing a while on that area. And I guess we'll take a look at one more fire. Can't get one that quite covers both of them. So we'll just look at the one in Wyoming there. Okay, very good. Go back earlier today. Starts out pretty clear there in Wyoming. I know they've had some very gusty winds, especially with the approach of that upper level system, because if you look at the upper level charts, 250 millibars, we're starting to bring that very strong flow perpendicular to the Rockies, and that's what really gets the lee side troughing going in this area right here. So this is a good pattern for very high winds in the central Rockies, and with the relative humidity being very low and the temperature being very high, this is definitely red flag conditions. So let's check out Wyoming there. This is going to be about 7 in the morning. Get up to about 9. And then about noon. I think I can see the first sign of it right there. Wow, that really... Yeah, if I run that back, I can kind of see some specks there. So I guess it was kind of a small fire that just got out of control. And then you can see later in the day it really gets going. And putting out a pretty good plume there with that very strong westerly flow. All right, so anyway, that's the fires. Let's look at the storms. We do have some convection there in Nebraska. We'll run things back earlier today. Keep in mind the front is to the west, and you can see these elevated storms earlier this morning, especially out around northwest of Omaha. That moves off into Iowa, and then we have this new boundary. I guess that probably is the front right there. You can see a difference in the cloud texture. These clouds are more like streets, and then here we see more transverse bands. So that's probably the cool air filtering back in behind, and there's some shallow streets right there. So running that forward, that boundary A couple boundaries move eastward, and then we see initiation right there. A couple towers going up. This is going to be about 4 p.m. And then it's right around this time that we had the tornado reports, and I'm not really too sure exactly where Cass County is. I'll give you the county overlays, and maybe somebody familiar with that area can figure that out, but I would guess it was probably on that storm right there. And that brings us up to about the current time. Looks like some very hard right propagation. See it right there? It's almost moving southward. So that deviant motion right there is indicative of very strong instability, so we get those strong pressure effects within the supercell that kind of steer it very far to the right of the mean wind, and that can really take it off the photograph and enhance the SRH, and maybe I can demonstrate that to you in a little bit. So anyway, yeah, there's Nebraska, and then you can see the haze or the dust, most likely dust in northwestern Oklahoma there, and a few very high turkey towers trying to get going right there. And then as we get the sunlight kind of sinking very low to the west, it really brings out that dust there. Could be haze, but I'm inclined to think that that's dust there. Anyway, so there's Oklahoma, and then we'll take a look out east. We don't look at these too much, but we do have some very strong storms there in the Carolinas. You can see some of the sea breeze right there. It's definitely got an air mass storm appearance, but some of the cells there on the coast, they look a little bit more organized. Okay, soundings. I guess Nebraska will be a good one to look at. So we'll start out with Omaha this evening. Actually, maybe we'll start that this morning. Bringing up the Omaha sounding. Okay. So there's what it looked like this morning, and there's quite a bit of elevated moisture right there just off the surface. It looks like that dryness is probably from a cold pool this morning. Looks like dew points are in the 56 to 57 range there. And then above that, you can see the dew points are more like in the low to mid 60s. A little bit of elevated moisture up at about 12,000 feet too. And then by evening, looks like a little bit of a rightward movement on the temperature trace. Let me show that to you. Let me go back. So yeah, a little bit of warming, probably some ridging affecting the area pretty heavily, but there's just quite a bit of moisture there, and that's helped to get the storms going. So breaking that cap, it would probably be right along that parcel right there. So probably the moisture a little bit better down to the south, and let's say probably a parcel looks about like that. So that's about 88 degrees with a 66 dew point and the LCL up at about 6,000 feet there. Doesn't look like a lot of, I don't know, that is some Cape, probably about 2,000 maybe. But we'll take a look at that on the high-resolution rapid refresh sounding. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go ahead and move into that forecast. Let's do that. Texas. Looks like kind of a quiet night, and we run that forward. A little cluster of storms up there in Kansas and Missouri moving southeast, but the Gulf is open. You can see numerous pressure lines coming up from the Mexico and Gulf area, and especially with those strong dynamics coming into the Central Plains there, that's helping to give some pressure falls at the surface. Tomorrow looks pretty clear. For the Central Plains, there's the storms there. Looks like they're initializing pretty well. And those will form up into an MCS and move into the Kansas City and northern Missouri area, Columbia, Jefferson City getting some storms. And of course that will lay down some outflow boundaries in this area right here. So if we're looking at storms tomorrow, those could be a factor. The upper level pattern, there's a strong dynamics, very zonal, surprisingly very zonal flow out in that region. And as a result, that's carrying a lot of the energy into Missouri, not Missouri, but Minnesota, Iowa, and the Dakotas. There's a good shortwave there moving through the Dakotas overnight. And here comes another chunk of energy around midday. So you might be thinking of storms in the Dakotas, but you have to keep in mind where the moisture is going to be. And it is on the move, so we need to look at the dew point. Let me see if I have any dew point charts. Yeah, I do. Tomorrow, the setup is going to be like this. Looks like a little bit of residual moisture in Iowa, but the northerly flow has taken its toll in Minnesota, Nebraska, Kansas, and the actual frontal boundary location is about like that right there. Kansas City down to around Canadian Texas and Clayton. Looks like a low pressure area right there around the Quad Cities. So I'm going to go with that for frontal position. So really, it looks like for that upper level energy to interact with the moisture, it's got to reach Iowa and Missouri and Illinois. We could get storms going in the Dakotas, but those would obviously be kind of elevated. If we look at the soundings in that area, this is for noon tomorrow. This will show you kind of the moisture problems they're having up there. So dew points around 56, tapering off very rapidly with height. So mixing the lower 150 millibars, you're looking at dew points of around 48. It's not totally dry, but it's going to be difficult to get any organized storms going with that. So let's see what happens later in the day. Okay, so there's 18Z. There's those dynamics moving in. They reach eastern South Dakota by evening, but they're tracking pretty well north of the moisture, which is in this area right here. So I'm not too sure if we're going to have much support for thunderstorms with that going well up to the north. There may be some elevated storms in Wisconsin, Lake Michigan, and Michigan itself overnight tomorrow. High pressure settling in across New Mexico right there. That's going to keep the ridge in place across West Texas and Colorado. Kind of a hot day for Texas. And then going into the rest of the week, continued ridging, and in fact, I can see right there the model is trying to develop a little bit of easterly flow in Texas, which is typically something we see in August. Yeah, in fact, yeah, it looks like it's trying to get centered around the Amarillo and western Oklahoma area later this week. Stagnant pattern up north, looks like continued westerly flow affecting the northern plains, so that's going to be good for rain up in this area, and a drought for Arizona and New Mexico, which is just great. All right, so we'll take it into the medium range. And we can see that front kind of sagging to the south. There it is right there around Tuesday midday. And then going into the evening, you can see we're not breaking out much in the way of thunderstorm activity in this area. High pressure, in fact, moving into the Dakotas and Minnesota and Iowa. So that's going to keep that front well to the south. It looks like a little bit of maybe upslope storms do get going, but those are going to be strongly diurnal. I don't know. Yeah, we're getting some moisture return. I'm surprised these storms are going with that very strong ridging, so let's see what the parcels look like. See what's going on here. So this is going to be Tuesday night. Yeah, those are some very high LCLs there, about 10,000 feet. So those storms are going to be kind of elevated in that region, but looks like we've got just enough decent moisture in place, surprisingly. Low 60s dew points up in this area. So that's helping to keep things sort of going there in Oklahoma for late Tuesday and Wednesday. can see that capping right there. But kind of a very weak wind profile there on the photograph. So looks like these storms will be a little bit on the disorganized side. Anyway, the high pressure coming into the Midwest. Boundary is going to be kind of settling in just like that. And the next outbreak of cold air starting to cross the Rockies on Thursday. And then we get up to Friday. And there it is. Gulf is open. Looks like we have a little bit of a disturbance coming up into the Texas Gulf Coast area around Saturday or Sunday. That's interesting. So anyway, that could bring some much needed rain to South Texas. The fronts up north, they stay, unfortunately, well up to the north. Not much help with that. So they're tracking mostly directly to the east. Monday and Tuesday, next week. Looks like a lot of storm action in Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, which is, I guess, good for the corn belt in that region. Looks like we're getting a bit of a kind of a stormy, deep tropical flow coming up the Rio Grande for Tuesday and Wednesday, 19th and 20th. And then the next big change. Not much of one. It looks pretty stagnant to me. Just kind of a series of fronts affecting the northern plains. Alternating highs and fronts and lows affecting that area, and then down in Texas and Oklahoma, Louisiana, just mostly the southerly flow, and a little bit of help with that little tropical wave affecting that area right there. The tropical cyclone that we had coming up to Florida, where is that? I don't think that's being picked up anymore. I guess maybe that's it. Maybe it carried that westward. So there's nothing on the GFS as far as tropical activity. Maybe one little wave right there around Thursday the 21st. But anyway, it looks to be otherwise kind of on the quiet side there. All right, let's see. Just finishing up chat here. Yep, huge fires indeed. Under tow 82, pointing that out. Electric Dog. Oh, hang on a second, my chat is updating. Ron Chalfant, smoke plume in Wyoming. Yeah, I appreciate the comments, Michelle, there. Tornado warnings have died down from now in Nebraska from under 282. Cass is just south of Omaha. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know right there. And Ron Chalfant reminding, don't forget to hit the like button. And Patrick Motes just arrived in time for the ending, but you can always catch the playback. It should be posted in about 10 or 15 minutes. All right, I think that's about all I got for tonight. I appreciate you all watching the webcast.